Hi guys, I think we're all familiar with the term, if it looks like a duck, swims like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. Now, can we apply the opposite, as is the case with this guy who's calling into LBC, who's claiming to be a criminal solicitor, which I have a bit of a problem with. Have a listen.
Yeah, look, so I want to give your listeners a peek behind the curtain, as it were. I mean, I'm a criminal solicitor, but I did a lot of immigration.
Okay, a criminal solicitor. Look, I was of the impression that there are two types of legal professionals. There are the solicitors who deal with things before they go to trial or deal with civil cases. And then you have barristers who operate within the courts. I've never heard of a criminal solicitor. Solicitors can specialize in different aspects of the law. And I'm not a legal expert, so anyone in the comment section correct me if I'm wrong here. But I've never heard this term before, criminal solicitor. Anyway, let's continue.
Public immigration work. Look, whether you're a lefty or a righty, firstly, the Conservative Party didn't unsign us from the ECHR, even though when they had a huge majority. So let's, straight off the bat, let's knock that on the head. But the more important point is that none of this matters as long as we're party to the ECHR through the Human Rights Act. This is all political fiction because as long as we are party to the convention, just as I used to before, we as the lawyers can challenge again. This means nothing, just as the Rwanda plan meant.
Wait a minute. Is it the lawyers that's the problem or the judges? Because the lawyers don't rule. It's the judges that rule. So shouldn't his problem be with the judges, not the lawyers?
Nothing, right? It won't lead to any change. And we've got politicians now who, for whatever reason, think the public are stupid. I mean, maybe some of the public are. But in terms of, especially Article 3, in terms of the immigration, tribunal...
Which covers, Jonathan, not to interject, but just Article 3 covers torture and inhuman and degrading treatment. Article 8 covers the right to a family life. Carry on.
Right, but Article 3 is the main one because it's the only one that there's no conditions upon it. Even with Article 2, which is a right to life, you can balance it against the public good. Article 8 also. All I need to do as a lawyer, without working as a law lecturer, all I need to do as a lawyer to lodge an appeal on behalf of one of my clients or former clients is to show that there's a reasonable prospect that their Article 3 rights will be infringed. So, I'm a ethnic minority as well. My parents were immigrants from similar part of the world to your parents. And, the police and army in our motherlands and fatherlands, a lot of them don't particularly respect human rights.
That's
right?
true. That's very true.
So all I need to show is that my client, I'll just make a name up, Mr. Khan from Kunduz in Afghanistan or wherever, that there is a reasonable prospect that if he is deported, regardless of whatever crimes he's committed here, he might be a rapist here, there's a reasonable prospect that he will be tortured or subjected to inhumane or human or degrading treatment, and then he stays. And again, you could think that hashtag refugees welcome here, or you could think send them all back. But I'm just giving the objective, point. And then
okay, but the law does not apply to individual cases, in the sense you have to look at individual cases, but you can't write legislation for individual cases. So, of course, some people will be able to take advantage of the law and other people will not be able to take advantage of the law. But you can't set, okay, what we're going to do is change the law because of a number of small cases. When it comes to the European Convention on Human Rights, it's been used to stop deportations in a handful of cases since the 1980s. So it's not like it's been used on a continual basis. This is the responsibility of the judges to decide whether this individual has a case or not the lawyers. I don't know why there's this focus on the lawyers as opposed to the law itself or the judge's decisions.
When I train up my younger lawyers, I say to them, as lawyers, all we're doing is we're representing the client, and we just file appeal after appeal after appeal. And I filed so many successful appeals for asylum seekers in places like Brookhouse, in places like Yarlswood, and this entire situation doesn't change. And for whatever reason, neither party wants to let the public in on this.
Well, Jonathan, this is a really, really important contribution, specifically because you are an immigration lawyer.
No, you're allegedly an immigration lawyer. Once again, I'm a little bit skeptical as to how much this guy is authentic. I'm not saying he's not. I have no evidence to suggest that he's not. But I'm a little bit skeptical. A bit more skeptical than the LBC host is.
Now, this goes to the centre of the argument, right, being made by Chris Philp, and I guess Reform UK would say the same thing, because both of them have come to the conclusion that being part of the European Convention on Human Rights simply does not work. Now, Robert Jenrick was the one who was unfashionably saying this quite a long time ago and was being ridiculed as completely ridiculous and outlandish and right-wing and all the rest of it. I think an increasing number of people are coming to that conclusion, including myself right now, pretty reluctantly, and I don't know what that means for the Northern Ireland peace process, but I guess we'll have to think about that quite hard. Now, if that is indeed the case, Jonathan, then is all this a smokescreen that Shabana Mahmood's talking about, sounding tough, but again, doomed to failure?
Yeah, I think so, and I'd go one step further. I think the Tories, what they're saying now, is the same thing also, because they had 14 years, and for whatever reason, when I was fighting the cases in front of the Immigration Tribunal, the Upper Tribunal, the Tories, and I know you've sort of run for the Tories before, but the Tories were talking tough, but still not unsigning.
Yeah, they didn't deliver. I agree, absolutely.
Yeah, and I don't really understand this, and also just on a non-lawyer point, as a ethnic minority brown man like you myself,
yes.
I, for the first time, we're of a similar age, I really feel this country's becoming tense now, especially, things like when I grow my beard out. I live in quite a, I don't live in Harrow, but I live in quite a white, deprived working class area, and it's really tense, and there's a real anger
I can feel it. I can feel it, Jonathan, too, and I think Shabana Mahmood to be...
Okay, then why aren't you supporting people to integrate? If you think there's a problem with integration, then why aren't you convincing people to integrate, helping people integrate? You have an opportunity there. You're, I believe, a respected member of the community, a lawyer. Surely you have a responsibility to help people integrate if you think that they're not.
Fair to her, can also, from what she's saying on the surface of it, also gets it. And maybe she gets it because of her background, and she can feel that the nation is divided. The question is, if her policy is not going to resolve it, then she's playing with fire.
Yeah, but I don't know why they keep. I don't know why they keep doing this. As in, by they, I mean Labour and the Conservatives. They keep saying we're going to. It's like it's the one in, one out policy.
Yeah,
which I said
useless,
at the time. I talked to one of your colleagues. I said it's not going to lead to any change. I said 5 years ago to Tom Torbeck. I said, look, you can be a right winger. You don't know my politics, Sally, right? You can be a right winger or a left winger. But in terms of the law, when I train up these 22, 23-year-old lawyers, I say as long as we've got the ECHR, if you're going to be a public immigration lawyer, just file challenge after challenge. And if you've got
So we got to the crux of the problem here, the motivation behind this call to convince people to support the idea of leaving the European Convention on Human Rights. Notice the host brought up the point of Northern Ireland, but there was no further discussion on that. Let's just forget about Northern Ireland. It's not really important. The Good Friday Agreement, who gives a crap about that? But of course, when it comes to the leaving the European Convention on Human Rights, what they're doing is they're focusing on a small number of cases and using this as a case of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Are there situations where people should not be staying in the country? Of course there are. But you can't throw out everyone's rights because of a small bunch of people. This is the problem. Those advocating for leaving the European Convention on Human Rights want to strip away protections for British people. That's what it's about. That's what it has always been about. So that corrupt business owners can sack people willy-nilly, where people have the right to protest taken away, and there's a whole range of other issues there. Farage, the Tories, are not interested in protecting people's rights. They never have been, they never will be. Well, so in order to convince people to sign away their own rights, to vote against their own interests, they have to latch on to a number of cases, like these ones. We heard about chicken nuggets, we heard about people not being sent back to their home because they had a long beard or something like that. What they'll do is they'll latch on to these cases where it's not actually, the case is not built on chicken nuggets or beards. These are factors that are taken into account by the judgment. But they'll latch on to that and say, see, we can't deport people, so we need to leave the European Convention on Human Rights. It's not about the asylum seekers. It's not about the immigrants. It's not about the people being deported. It's about stripping away protections for British people. That's what it has always been about. And a few years ago, I thought it was absurd, and I dismissed it as absurd, the idea that the UK would eventually leave. But we're marching slowly. It's like a slow drip, drip, drip towards a situation where maybe Reform hold a referendum, or where Parliament votes on something like this. We're getting closer to a reality where politicians and their friends in the media will convince the public, yeah, the only way to solve this problem that isn't really that much of a problem that impacts most people, the only way to solve this problem is to leave the European Convention on Human Rights. In the same way as they convinced people we need to leave the EU in order to bring down immigration. We need to leave the EU in order to properly fund the NHS. We need to leave the EU in order to deal with a jobs crisis. The same people, remember, the same people who are selling the idea of leaving the EU are the same people selling the idea of leaving the ECHR. And their ECHR abandonment is a panacea. It's presented as a panacea, a fix to all problems. And they need to be challenged. And I'm not saying it's not true, but I'm not fully buying the idea that this guy is a criminal solicitor, if such a thing actually exists. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think, and I'll see you in the next video.